Something stirs in the darkness long before anyone notices what it really means. On November 16th, 2025, at 2030 hours local time in the Caribbean Sea, a formation moves with such size and purpose that every radar operator from Puerto Rico to Caracas sits up a little straighter. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the most powerful naval force in the world, has entered the region with its deck lights dimmed and radar emissions kept low. On paper, it's a routine counter-narcotics patrol under U.S. Southern Command. But no one in the region believes that. This isn't about drugs. It's about presence, influence, and the message that comes from deploying America's most advanced carrier to Latin American waters for the first time since 1989. The formation cuts through the Caribbean with the Ford at the center, destroyers USS Thomas Hudner and USS Ramage guarding its flanks, and the cruiser USS Normandy covering the rear. Air Wing 8 sits silently on deck. Super, Hornets, Growlers, Seahawks, fueled, armed, and waiting. Across the region, news feeds ignite as satellite images reveal the massive group pushing south of Puerto Rico into Fourth Fleet's zone of control. Everyone knows what it means. In Caracas, officials call it an act of intimidation. Within hours, Venezuela's president signs a mobilization order. Naval and air units move to high alert. Radar stations along La Guaira, Puerto Cabello, and Paraguana switch to continuous sweep. Fishing fleets are told to avoid open waters. Along the coast, military operators lean over outdated consoles, watching the skies and sea for any sign of U.S. escalation. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, the mood stays deliberately calm. Condition 3, normal readiness. Electronic warfare teams log radar sweeps coming from Venezuela, signatures belonging to Chinese-built JL-10B systems. Nothing unexpected. What changes isn't the data, but the tone. Venezuela's Navy transmits a broad, nameless message into the airwaves. Any foreign vessel approaching our sovereign limits will be intercepted. No coordinates, no details. But the meaning is obvious to everyone aboard the Ford. By 2100 hours, U.S. listening posts and shipboard intercepts pick up more chatter from the Venezuelan coast. Fast boat crews are standing by. In the Combat Direction Center, a firm reminder goes out. We are in international waters. Stay professional. Stay predictable. Outside, the sea looks peaceful black water beneath a moonless sky. But hundreds of miles south, a young radar operator in Puerto Cabello leans in toward his flickering screen. A new echo has appeared. Too big, too slow, too steady. To him, it looks like a lone American destroyer running north of Venezuelan waters. In reality, it is the first link in a chain of misinterpretations about to unfold. What starts as a simple warning soon becomes something else entirely. The decisions made over the next few hours will transform this moment from a routine patrol into a direct challenge against the most powerful warship afloat. As the operator watches the large, steady radar contact inch across his scope, he calls for confirmation. Others gather around. No one questions the assumption. The system is outdated, and the reflections from multiple ships in the carrier group blend together into one oversized return. To them, it's a single ship, maybe even a deliberate probe. The belief hardens quickly, and a judgment is made that will shape everything that comes next. The first order is drafted. Engines will start soon, and what they think they see will lead them straight into a confrontation none of them are remotely prepared to handle. Within minutes, the misinterpretation becomes action. At 014, 2 hours on November 12th, radar operators in Puerto Cabello have been awake for hours, their consoles cluttered with coffee cups and notebooks. The stale smell of dust and warm electronics fills the small room. Then the new echo reappears steady, deliberate, and now only 90 nautical miles north of La Guaira. To the tired operators, it can only be one thing: an American destroyer running alone, attempting to intimidate or provoke a response. No one considers that this reading is already outdated. The signature they see is not one ship, but an entire carrier strike group hidden behind radar interference and horizon masking. 15 minutes later, an order is signed with full confidence. 6 fast patrol boats push away from the docks, their diesel engines churning white smoke into the damp night. Each carries a crew of 8, armed with 12.7 millimeters heavy machine guns and short-range rocket pods, small, fast, lightly armored, and unpredictable. They accelerate north at 35 knots, sometimes brushing 40 as their hulls slam down hard onto the swells. Running dark, they cut through the water like street fighters in the naval world, aggressive, brave, but wildly outmatched. Inside the lead boat, the young commander watches his radar repeater, unaware that the information guiding him is 30 minutes behind reality. To him, the bright dot ahead is a solitary Burke-class destroyer. He expects a tense intercept, maybe radio warnings, maybe a circling maneuver. What he is actually closing in on is the largest and most defended vessel on Earth, the Gerald R. Ford, surrounded by layers of escort ships and electronic warfare coverage. From his angle, the carrier's escorts are hidden behind the radar horizon. The outdated Chinese firmware on Venezuela's coastal systems merges multiple reflections into a single echo. One contact, one misreading, one mistake. At 0210 hours, the patrol boats cross the final edge of Venezuela's territorial waters. The coastline fades into the darkness behind them. What remains is the compass, the pulsing radar screen, and the low rumble of engines pushing them into the open Caribbean. The commander sends a short-coded burst to base, estimating visual contact in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, aboard the Ford, those same minutes are counted carefully. Radar screens show multiple small surface returns racing northward. The operators know exactly what they're looking at: 6 fast, erratic contacts closing from the south. The computer assigns automatic identifiers: Skunk Alpha 1 through 6. The Ford is still at condition 3, but that changes quickly. The watch officer calls for condition 1. Within seconds, the dynamic inside the Combat Information Center shifts. Additional crew members take their stations, weapon systems come online, and the quiet focus becomes sharper. Electronic warfare operators pick up faint bursts of VHF static low-power tactical radios from the approaching boats. The captain issues an immediate order: launch both MH-60R Seahawks. Within minutes, 2 helicopters rise into the night, rotor blades carving through the humid air as they head south for visual confirmation of the unknown vessels. Back in the CIC, a calm voice transmits a standard maritime warning: unidentified surface vessels. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. You are approaching a restricted zone. Identify yourself and alter course immediately. The only response is silence, and the radar tracks continue closing the distance. CRM and CIWS systems move to standby, cameras locking onto the approach vectors. The tension is controlled but unmistakably present. The next few miles will determine if this remains an incident or becomes something far more dangerous. The Seahawks move fast, cutting low across the water as they close in on the unknown contacts. At 0219 hours, the first crew spots them 6 narrow wakes slicing through the black surface in tight formation, each boat pushing hard against the waves. Their bow waves glow faintly under the weak moonlight as the helicopter circles widely and relays the confirmation back to the carrier. These are no fishing vessels, no smugglers, no commercial craft. They are fast patrol boats, armed, organized, and closing far too quickly to be acting independently. A threat, not a misunderstanding. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, every operator now understands the escalation. The incoming boats are too fast, too deliberate, and too coordinated to be anything but military units responding to their mistaken radar picture. Weapons Control categorizes them as probable hostile patrol craft, but the carrier group maintains strict radio silence. No threats, no warnings, only posture. The destroyers, Thomas Hudner and Ramage, slide into flanking positions. tightening the protective ring around the ford. Behind them, the cruiser Norman slightly, completing a full defensive bubble around the strike group. Then, over an open frequency, a burst of static cuts through the calm air. A man's voice, tense and accented, declares, "Unidentified vessels, you are entering Bolivarian waters. Alter course immediately." The irony hangs heavy. The ford is nowhere near Venezuelan waters. But the U.S. Ships say nothing. They stay silent, steady, and predictable because the wrong sentence on the wrong frequency can carry more risk than any weapon. 2 minutes later, at 0221 hours, one of the Venezuelan patrol boats makes a move no one aboard the ford can ignore. It activates its fire control radar. On the EW console, the spike appears instantly, short-range, X-band, high pulse rate, direct lock, and it's aimed straight at the USS Thomas Hudner. In the CIC, the report cuts through the room. "CIC, we're being painted." But the captain remains steady. The order is simple: track but do not engage. Outside, the Seahawk, hovering 5 miles from the group, confirms the lock visually. Its sensor glows bright, clearly aimed at the destroyer. Automatic defensive systems aboard the Hudner react instantly. CIWS turrets rotate, their infrared cameras locking onto the source of the radar lock. The data streams across every console. Every weapon is ready, but still no one fires. 7,000 yards. 6,000. 8,000 on another bearing. 6 patrol boats, weapons uncovered, facing a carrier group that could erase them in under a minute. It's an impossible scene, power balanced on the edge of restraint. At 0223 hours, everything stops. 6 Venezuelan boats idle in the dark, engines rumbling, motionless against the waves. They face the ford's entire strike group like challengers who didn't realize the size of the arena until it was too late. For several seconds, the world holds its breath. This is the kind of moment where a single radio call, a single misinterpreted movement, a single misfired flare could shape foreign policy for years. Then one boat breaks the stillness. Its engines roar. The bow rises sharply, water exploding behind it. Speed climbs past 40 knots, and it's not turning away. It's charging straight at the American formation. Inside the Ford CIC, voices remain calm but sharpened. On the bridge of the Thomas Hudner, the officer of the deck watches the range collapse. 3 nautical miles. 2, 1.5. Green signal flares fire upward from the Hudner, the international command to turn away. But the boat keeps coming. The numbers fall quickly, now 1,000 yards, then less. CIWS mounts lock on. On the Venezuelan boat, the commander sees the destroyer looming ahead like a steel cliff, his radar feed cluttered with distorted pings from U.S. jamming. He doesn't understand the picture, and there's no time to analyze it. Then, just before the point of no return, the engines throttle back hard. The boat swerves left, spray blasting across its deck, and the entire formation collapses with it. One turns, then another, then the rest. 6 overlapping wakes streak back toward Venezuelan waters in a chaotic retreat. No shots fired. But the message is unmistakable. They came within seconds of catastrophe. The radar screens inside the Ford's Combat Direction Center track the retreat in real time. Jagged, overlapping wakes fade southward, the 6 small boats shrinking into distant echoes. No weapons had been launched, no alarms blared, yet everyone in the room knows how close they came to a different outcome. A second too early, and it would have been war. A second too late, and Venezuela's patrol boats would have found themselves humiliated beyond repair. Instead, the moment passes in a strange quiet that settles over the room like a thin layer of dust. The captain exhales once, barely audible, then orders, "Maintain course and speed. Do not pursue." And just like that, routine returns. Even if the routine now feels heavier. By the time the sun rises over the Caribbean, the Gerald R. Ford strike group is already 60 miles north of the encounter point, maintaining a steady 20-knot northwest heading. The night's tension lingers only in brief conversations among watchstanders and pilots reviewing their logs. For the rest of the crew, it's another morning at sea flight ops, scheduled, maintenance tasks posted, and rotations set like any other day. But while the ship moves quietly and efficiently through open water, the story outside travels fast. In Caracas, state television interrupts its morning news cycle with low-resolution video captured from one of the retreating patrol boats. The clip shows grainy silhouettes of distant warships against the horizon. The caption reads, U.S. fleet retreats. The footage spreads quickly across social media, edited and reshared by pro-government accounts. Within minutes, the narrative shifts from confusion to victory. Venezuela's government frames the encounter as a bold act of resistance that forced the Americans to withdraw. Meanwhile, in the Pentagon, analysts prepare a calm rebuttal. A press release includes satellite imagery, AIS data, and GPS timestamps showing the Ford strike group more than 80 nautical miles from Venezuelan waters throughout the entire event. The message is simple. The U.S. Navy never crossed any territorial boundary, but truth rarely spreads as fast as spectacle. Diplomats from both nations exchange quiet messages through Swiss channels, trying to prevent public escalation while avoiding rhetoric that could inflame tensions even further. At 4th Fleet headquarters in Mayport, readiness levels rise quietly. Additional reconnaissance flights are authorized, and regional commanders begin reviewing contingency plans. None of these changes are announced publicly. The State Department urges restraint on all sides, even as military leadership prepares for the possibility that the incident could inspire future miscalculations. Back aboard the Ford, sailors move through their routines with practiced ease. The incident is logged as an event of interest, a familiar phrase for encounters that come close to conflict without crossing into it. No official complaint is filed. No weapons were discharged. No one was harmed. On paper, it is simply another near miss at sea. Yet no one mistakes this calm for stability. In the CIC, operators continue to track distant radar sweeps from Venezuelan coastal installations. One officer notes a faint JL-10B pulse brushing across the carrier's airspace, nothing threatening, but not accidental either. A probing sweep, a reminder that while the boats have turned back, the tension remains in the water. The mission continues, officially unchanged. But unofficially, every sailor feels the difference. The Caribbean appears calm under the rising sun, a soft stretch of blue hiding the friction beneath. Maritime politics rarely erupts in dramatic flashes. More often, it simmers in silence and small gestures. A swept radar beam, a misinterpreted echo, a boat that turns seconds before disaster. From a distance, the incident means little. No missiles were launched. No ships were damaged. There are no breaking headlines declaring crisis or conflict. But inside the Pentagon, analysts review the footage frame by frame, studying every decision, every reaction, every hesitation, because everyone there knows that this calm wasn't luck. It was discipline, pure, deliberate discipline on the part of the Ford strike group. And that discipline is the only reason the world woke up without a new crisis in the Caribbean. That discipline becomes the centerpiece of every internal briefing as analysts walk through the events in slow motion. They examine the radar signatures, the radio calls, the helicopter footage, and the movement of every surface contact. The lesson is clear. Nothing about the U.S. response was accidental. The Ford strike group followed protocol with a level of precision that left no room for improvisation or misinterpretation. Each action was measured, each choice deliberate. The officers reviewing the incident know that many navies talk about professionalism, but only a handful can execute it under pressure, with weapons ready, sensors active, and danger seconds away. For Venezuela, the mistakes began long before the patrol boats left the docks. Their coastal radar systems, built around older Chinese JL-10B units, were never designed to handle the complex reflections that occur around large naval formations. The firmware lacked the sophistication needed to differentiate multiple ships operating in tight patterns. As a result, The reflections from the Ford and its escorts merged into a single oversized return, a basic error, but catastrophic in its implications. Working with flawed data, Venezuela's coordinators believed they were approaching a solitary hostile ship. In reality, they were speeding toward a carrier strike group layered with defenses, airborne helicopters, destroyers equipped with Aegis combat systems, rapid-fire CIWS guns, missile interceptors, and electronic warfare suites capable of blinding any radar within miles. The imbalance was staggering. Yet the crews aboard those small patrol boats had no idea. The Ford's response was the opposite of hurried action. First came detection, then verification, then visual confirmation from helicopters. No assumptions were made. No one interpreted the fast-approaching boats as hostile until the fire control radar lock was detected. Even then, the American captain refused to let adrenaline decide the outcome. When the Hudner was painted by the radar of a Venezuelan boat, every defensive system aboard the strike group activated instantly, just as they were designed to. CRAM pods powered up, CIWS batteries locked onto the threat, infrared cameras tracked the source, but the captain's voice never cracked. Track, but do not engage, he ordered. The discipline in that command set the tone. This restraint is more powerful than the weapons themselves. Anyone can fire when threatened. The real test is choosing not to fire when the situation could still turn. In naval operations, especially those involving nations with tense political histories, misinterpretation can be as dangerous as an attack. One sailor in the wrong console, one weapon firing out of sequence, one officer deciding to escalate without confirmation, any of these could have triggered a chain reaction ending in tragedy. The Ford's command team understood that their adversary had far more to lose. In a direct confrontation, those 6 boats would not have lasted seconds. But destroying them would ignite diplomatic shockwaves across Latin America, embolden rival powers, and risk a conflict that neither nation wanted. By holding fire, the U.S. sent a more powerful message than any missile ever could. They demonstrated confidence, not bravado. Control, not aggression. They showed that dominance is not proven by destruction, but by the ability to prevent it. Meanwhile, global tracking networks and satellite systems recorded every moment of the incident. Every AIS signal, every radar pulse, every GPS timestamp painted a consistent picture. The Ford strike group never entered Venezuelan waters. The U.S. didn't retreat. The Venezuelan boats turned back. The data allowed no alternative interpretation. As analysts conclude their briefings, a shared understanding settles in. This wasn't an accident. It was a near miss built on miscalculation, a reminder of a lesson the ocean never forgets. Discipline is stronger than firepower. And the greatest mistake any nation can make is assuming it can challenge both. With that understanding in mind, the Pentagon's review shifts from analysis to implications. The encounter off Venezuela's coast might not dominate headlines, but policymakers know how quickly small maritime incidents can shape larger geopolitical realities. The Caribbean has become a strategic crossroads once again, a place where global powers test boundaries, measure reactions, and push narratives. Venezuela's government celebrates the retreat that never happened, while the United States quietly reinforces the value of measured professionalism. Both sides walk away claiming something, but only one side understands the full picture of how close things came to breaking. In Washington, advisors debate the appropriate response. Some argue for a firm public stance, insisting that Venezuela must be reminded of the consequences of reckless military maneuvers. Others support a quieter approach, fearing that calling attention to the incident will reward political theater and strengthen anti-American narratives in the region. For now, the White House chooses to stay largely silent, leaving the interpretation of events to data and time rather than rhetoric. Meanwhile, in Caracas, the government amplifies its version of the story. Footage of dark silhouettes and distant wakes becomes a symbol of resistance, replayed on state television and circulated online. Supporters frame the event as proof of national strength. Critics argue it exposes dangerous miscalculations. But no matter the interpretation, the narrative becomes a tool reshaped to reinforce political objectives rather than reflect reality. Back aboard the Gerald R. Ford, life resumes with almost uncanny normalcy. Flight operations rotate through their schedule. Maintenance crews carry on with routine checks. The noise of jet engines and the steady hum of machinery fills the hangar bay. Most sailors have already moved on, filing the incident away under the long list of tense moments that never make it past a single news cycle. Some discuss it quietly over coffee, marveling at how quickly danger appeared and disappeared. Others barely acknowledge it at all. Life on a carrier is too demanding to linger on what-ifs. Yet beneath the routine, there's an unspoken recognition that the mission has changed. The strike group proceeds along its assigned path, but now with heightened attention, communications remain steady. Airborne patrols run tighter patterns. The radar sweeps continue without pause. The sea may look calm, but no one forgets that tension can surface at any moment, often from the smallest misunderstanding. The officers on board understand well that maritime conflicts rarely begin with dramatic announcements. They start with a misread echo, a hurried assumption, an untrained radar operator detecting a shadow on the screen. They begin in silence long before engines start or weapons activate. That is why discipline matters. It is the barrier that prevents misjudgment from becoming catastrophe. In this case, it held. But everyone knows it won't always be so simple. As evening settles over the Caribbean, the Ford continues northward, cutting a steady path through gentle waves. Sunset paints the sky in streaks of gold and red while the ship moves forward as if the night before never happened. But the world beyond the horizon remembers. Military analysts discuss the event in secure rooms. Diplomats exchange discreet messages. Regional leaders reassess their positions quietly. And online, the debate grows louder as people argue over what really happened and what it means for the future. In the end, the incident becomes a question that echoes beyond the footage and the radar screens. Should the United States continue responding with calm professionalism, trusting that patience prevents conflict? Or should Washington take a harder line to deter future challenges at sea? Viewers are left to decide for themselves. These questions shape policy just as much as strategies and treaties. And for those watching, for those fascinated by the fragile balance of power on open water, the final message is simple. I want to hear your thoughts. Did the Navy handle this with the right balance of restraint and readiness? Should the U.S. push back harder against Venezuela's boldness? Share your view in the comments. I read every single one. If you found this breakdown clear and compelling, hit like and subscribe. Tap the bell to stay updated. Your support means a lot. And if you want to help this channel grow even more, consider joining our community. Membership gives you loyalty badges, priority replies, and a chance to help bring more real maritime stories to the surface. Just visit our channel page and click join. Thanks for watching, shipmates. Until next time, fair winds and following seas. And if you ever feel tempted to challenge a U.S. carrier strike group, well, take a deep breath and think twice.